What if I told you that the Psalms, when they talk about the chaos monster, one, they talk about God as being the one who fights it more than our struggle with it. And not only that, but they take it and they apply it to the creation narrative. You split open the sea by your strength. You broke the heads of the sea monsters. First off, notice it's heads, sea monsters, so there's a plural of the monsters in the waters. And then you crushed the heads, plural, of Leviathan, singular. So you have multiple sea monsters and a multi-headed sea monster that God crushed. To me, this pulls up two major passages within the Torah that comes to memory, and then it pulls up some of the texts to be read at the very beginning to memory. Verse 13 plays into that language of the idea of there are multiple monsters. Remember, with Baal, it talks more about him fighting Yam and Mot, but also it has his sister, who seems like she's also fighting the dragon, but she's fighting like more of the ones that represent him. But then also you have like another text where Baal is like, the question is he fighting multiple things or is he fighting the one thing? But in here you have Leviathan is being crushed by God, but also there is the multiple monsters that are being crushed by God. So there are multiple enemies here, with the head one being Leviathan, who has multiple heads, and he crushes all of them, like all their heads. So we have that. So it's playing into that language, but also we have you split open the seas. To me, that calls back on two major texts. The most explicit one, I think, is probably going to be Exodus 14 with the splitting of the Red Sea, or Sea of Reeds, where, he splits the sea and they pass through. You drive the rivers and they pass through, which I think was when we talked about how there's like a decreation moment for Egypt where we have like the floodwaters recovering back over, but the Israelites are passing through like Noah's Ark into new life. It's like a little mini creation moment for them, a recreation. But it was a decreation for Egypt. Calls back on that. But remember, Exodus 14 and 15 are really playing back on Genesis 6 and 7, which is playing back on Genesis 1 with the parting of the waters on day 2 and day 3. So it's kind of interesting how it's playing with these other texts that are outside the Bible, but also it's using to play with the text within the Bible, where it's kind of like fusing the Exodus with Genesis. And it's just all like, well, which one are you talking about? I was like, yes, they're all the same kind of event. They're just different. Like one's a huge cosmic scale, one's a mini scale. So like the psalmist is like, if we're taking the Exodus part right now, the psalmist is saying, from an Exodus standpoint, you freed your people before. Like you saved them from the enemy. Why won't you do it now? Like you saved us from the conflict. You saved us from our enemies, like our little enemy of being Egypt, which we've looked at how it describes Egypt like it's a chaos monster, like the serpent. But you won't do it now. We're far off from you. I think we've served our time. Why aren't we back yet? Why aren't we away from this exile, the separation? Why are we still at conflict? You saved us before. Why won't you save us now? Like we started with like the floods. Like you saved all the people from the entirety of the cosmos, where you flooded everything, and you saved them and redeemed them. But you won't do it for us now. And if we go back to Genesis 1, verse 16, yours is the day, yours is the night. You also established the light and the sun. So these are the things that God has done in Genesis 1, where he establishes time. He establishes the lights, the sun on day 4, and then the time boundaries on day 1. He defines all the boundaries of the earth, the land, which he did in Genesis day 3, with the waters being moved over, so the land could have its boundary and the water has its boundary. So it's all converging. So if you take it into the macrocosmic level, he's like saying, you brought order to everything, but you won't bring order to us right now. You're leaving us in disarray. You're leaving us to the monster. You crushed the monster before. Why won't you crush the monster again? Of which is interesting because, remember, Genesis 1, there is no conflict. But the psalmist is treating it like there is conflict. He's saying there was a conflict, even though we know that Genesis 1, there was no conflict. So it's not a contradiction, but he's saying like, you overcame all these things before. You brought order in all these things. Why won't you bring order now? Why are you leaving us in judgment and disorder? But yeah, the psalmist is crying to God, asking God to remember the people who made a covenant with and saved. The enemies of Israel scoff as they see how they have been on receiving end of God's anger. The psalmist recognizes that Yahweh is the one who brings about recreation, is the one who truly defeats the dragon. The psalmist cries, asking God to forgive Israel and deal with the enemies of his covenant people. It's like, forgive us, please. I think we got the point now. Please save us. Okay, we'll go to Psalm 89 then. I will sing of the steadfast love of Yahweh forever with my mouth. I will make known your faithfulness to all generations. For I said, steadfast love will be built up forever in the heavens. You will establish your faithfulness. You have said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David my servant. I will establish your offspring forever and build your throne for all generations. Selah. So verse 1 and 2 is a comment from the psalmist itself, where he's talking about like the praises of the Psalter for Yahweh's love and faithfulness, and praise that he keeps the covenant that he has established. The next one is him saying what the covenant specifically is that he's talking about. So he's like, praise God, because you have this covenant, you have steadfast love, you're faithful, and here's why. Because you have said this, let the heavens praise your wonders, or let the sky, or the upper waters, praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness, in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? O, a great God to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. O Lord, God of hosts, who is mighty as you are, O Lord, with your faithfulness all around you. Assembly of the holy ones are the members of the divine council. If you want, you can go to Psalm 82, which is what Jesus quotes in John 10. We also have Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32 is where Moses is giving his whole summary, kind of like a statement of what's happened beforehand for Israel, what they've gone through. And in there, it looks back on moments like Genesis 11, where he looks at it as, is not just God dividing up the nations in judgment, is God in using Pauline language, Psalm language, is disinheriting them. That's why he talks about Israel being his inheritance. And you have that, it says that he divided them according to the sons of God, unless you have a translation that still says sons of Israel, which doesn't really work because Israel wasn't established yet. It's not established for many, many more chapters and hundreds of years. And Israel's not over the nations, so it doesn't really make sense anyways. That was a Masoretic text issue. But the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint and the Targum all said the angels. And you have early church fathers who even quote it, and it says he divided them to the angels. But God's also over the angels. So like they're still his, but also like they're no longer his focus. It's kind of like a Romans 1 moment where he's like, I'm done. You don't want to be with me? Be in your sin. Have your way. I'll let you see what it's like being fully engulfed by the very thing you want. I'm going to select the one who actually wants to follow me. But then you have Daniel 7, which is the vision of the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man coming. But it mentions there that Ancient of Days sits down in his court, and then the court also partakes in there, and the word there is in the plural. So you have multiple people that are involved that are there. You also have Ezekiel 1, where you have the four-faced creatures with multiple wings, and they have wheels attached to them, and they're moving the chariot. You also have in Isaiah 6, where you have the seraphim all there praising God in the presence of his throne room. You also have Job 1, where it literally says that the sons of God come to give an account of the things they have been doing in his name and all those things, etc., etc., etc. You have a passage in, I think it's 1st or 2nd Kings, where you actually get a little view of what's happening in one of these moments, where a spirit, the spirits are back and forth discussing, like, what should we do about this king? How are we going to get rid of him? God's like, how do you want to handle this? And they're like, well, we could do this, we could do this. One's like, I could trick him into going somewhere to die. And God's like, okay, we'll do that. Let's run with that. So he lets him delegate. He lets him deliberate. He delegates the ability to have deliberation, even though he knows ultimately what's going to happen, but he still lets him partake in those things. And so the question is being asked is effectively, what Elohim, because Elohim is not a name, it's a title. So what Elohim is like you, O Yahweh? None, for they are all creatures too. You made them. Only you are so awesome, so faithful, so powerful. And these other Elohim that are members of his assembly are recognized as Elohim, but not nearly as great as Elohim. Or in the words of scholars like Heiser, Mackey, Walton, he is incomparable. That they're not even close to matching up to what he is. Elohim is, we translate as God, but it could be better understood as like, God's a fine word for their understanding, but for our understanding, we kind of get lost in the God and what we have certain attributes tied to that. So think of it almost like a place of residence. Is the beings that reside in the spiritual realm, whether it be the upper realm or the lower realm, like the realm of the dead or the realm of like God's heavenly throne room. That's kind of like how that word's really used. So you have multiple Elohim, and God's one of them, but he's the only one that is not created, and he's the only one that is as powerful as he. None of them are like him. You rule the raging of the sea. I think that's interesting. The sea is raging. When its waves rise, you still them. I think knowing about Jesus, that's really interesting because, he calms a storm twice. He calms a storm once, then he walks over a storm, then he calms it. Just saying, it's kind of interesting. Interesting how the psalm set up what Jesus does. But it then says, you crushed Rahav like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. The heavens are yours, the earth also is yours. The world and all that is in it, you have founded them. To the north and the south, you have created them. Tabor and Hermon joyously praise your name. So we have mountains praising God. We got entire creation that's established by him. We have his mighty hand that is used of judgment. And there was a dragon that he crushed like it was nothing. But wait a minute, again, there was no dragon in Genesis 1. But he's talking about like creation. You've created all these things. You've crushed the dragon. You created everything. Well, he's looking at it and he's kind of like taking the other religions and like, look, they all think it's Baal. They think it's Marduk. They think it's this God, that God. You did it. You're the master of all things. Baal's nothing compared to you. Marduk's nothing compared to you. So much so that when you crushed the dragon, it was like nothing. It was like it was already dead just by your mere presence. And this ties with his right hand, his mighty arm. And then it goes on about how the skies, the land, all that is in it is yours. And the waters, you conquered the waters. So the entire cosmos is yours. The entire cosmos is your property. It is completely under your beck and call. You are so powerful that nothing in it can stand up against you. The other Elohim can't do anything. The divine council can't do anything. The dragons can't do anything. Humans can't do anything. You are so powerful. You're so amazing. I just think that's kind of interesting. Like all that is just jam-packed in those like little verses. Because we get a mini description of this divine conflict or warfare and creation all mixed together in like just those few little statements, which is taking a very different perspective on creation itself. There is no one as great as he in the heavenly realm. The reason is that he is the one who crushed the chaos dragon in creation and scattered his enemies. Not Marduk, not Baal. He is the one who created all things. They are his. However, instead of the plain with reworking of the dragon slaying myth found in Genesis 1, where like Genesis 1, he just speaks, everything's peaceful and quiet, and the dragon he creates to be there and is a good thing, where there is no conflict. Now we have conflict. And Psalm 89 acts as if there was a battle rather than speaking with no conflict. But the conflict is like not really a conflict. It's just nothing for him. So you have a mighty arm, strong as your hand, high your right hand. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. Flourishing or happy are the people who know the festal shout, who walk, O Lord, in the light of your face, who exult in your name all the day and in your righteousness are exalted. For you are the glory of their strength. By you favor our horn is exalted. For our shield belongs to Yahweh, our King, to the Holy One of Israel. So happy and flourishing are those who know, like this cry, this shouting of what God has done in this celebration, this great exclamation of the things that he has done, this exclamation of who he is and his steadfast love, his righteousness, his faithfulness. Of old you spoke in a vision to your godly one. Ooh. And said, I have granted help to one who is mighty. I have exalted one chosen from the people. I'm going to skip ahead here just because this is a long section I have typically originally highlighted. I will set his hand on the sea. That's interesting. And his right hand on the rivers. Again, that's interesting. He shall cry to me, you are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. I will make him the firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever, and my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his offspring forever and his throne as the days of the heavens. So we're talking about David's line. Remember, if you go back several verses, he says, David's my chosen one. This is what I'm going to be working through, his line. And we get this huge like conditional statement, like, I will do all this. And later it's kind of go of like, if you keep doing this, I'll do all these things. If you don't, and David's line goes out disarray, then I'm not going to give you these things. You're actually going to be struggling here. Well, and we see that they struggle there. Which is why like we see like a mixture of like Jesus language and a mixture of it's not quite Jesus language, because Jesus, doesn't need salvation. He doesn't need saving. But at the same time, like, he is of David's line. And, the interesting thing here is whose hand is now over the sea? The Yam, the chaos water. The home of the dragon. It's a man. It's a human, not God. God is going to be giving this human authority to put his hand over the sea. I will set his hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers, which has been language. If you remember, we go back. We talked about how there was the raging of the sea, and when his waves rise, you still them with his hand. He crushed them with his hand. But now he's delegating that to a human. That would be from the chosen line, which would be of David's line. And it's like this little conditional promise of like, I'll give you this if you're like involved here. But also like we see that there's a condition of, well, like also you might not get to experience this. But there's also one who does come who has this. But also he doesn't need the salvation. He is the salvation. This is all this weird mixture of in and out, like you're kind of getting messianic language. You're also kind of not getting messianic language. And you're this weird little in-between of like there's a human who will have this power over the sea and the waters. And then he will be called the firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My steadfast love I will keep for him forever. That sounds like something the Father does for the Son. There's a little bit of that in there. My covenant will stand firm for him. I'll establish his offspring. And that's where you kind of get like, okay, maybe it's not quite messianic, but then you also kind of get into like, well, we're also children of God, but we're not children of Jesus. We're children of the Father. But like, you kind of just get this weird little weaving in and out. You kind of see Jesus. You also don't necessarily see Jesus. It's just like this back and forth. But it is all that Davidic line. There'll be humans who could have power over the chaos. Kind of like Moses. But is God working through Moses? But it's really God who does it. But in this case, God's saying, I'll give him this power to this person. But it'll be from him. Moses lifts his staff and the seas part. Hand over the chaos. And there's all this really interesting language. I then next have this really long quote from Angel. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it would just take a while. His whole point there is really like, look, you have this pairing of the sea and the rivers and the waters of chaos. Like the pairing that I just kind of mentioned, you have these things. But also, you see that God makes all these promises, but we remember they're conditional because we then see there's all these things where it seems like he's not going to fulfill them or he hasn't fulfilled them within the Psalter's mindset. Because this psalm is also a lamenting psalm. He's like lamenting for the fact that you promised us this if we did this, but we didn't. Our kings didn't. And now we don't have this. But God's promise is that if the kings are, then he will give this. And it's kind of interesting he didn't have a king who does come, and he does get that. And he has the power over the sea, and all this is all this weird, cool language was all with this conditional language, and then the Psalter goes into this lament of like, and yet we don't get this. God doesn't fulfill this promise, if you will, because it was conditioned on XYZ, and we didn't keep XYZ. And it's just kind of, I think it's kind of cool. Psalm 91, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up. So this is God who's commanding this. Lest you strike your foot against a stone. So there's like this protection. He's watching out for you. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the tanin, or the taninim. You will trample underfoot. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him, I will protect him because he knows my name. That's God speaking. So he's like saying like, again, this is like God's the one who's doing this, but like he will provide the way for those who are faithful and who walk with him, the ability to walk over the chaos monster. Not that they'll conquer it like he can, but they can walk over it. To me, that sounds a little bit like Peter, where it's like, it says that Jesus walks on the sea and Peter goes, can I walk on the water? There's a very important difference between the two words there, because you have the sea, and remember the Jewish backdrop, the sea being the chaos water, and it's all described as this chaotic storm. And Peter's like asking for the water, because he's relying on Jesus because Jesus is divine, and Jesus is doing it because he's divine. And so Peter's like able to walk over the chaos, or over the chaos, the vipers, if you will, over the waters, because of Jesus, who's God. And in this case, because of God and his protection, those who walk with him will walk over the vipers, the poisonous snakes, the chaos monsters. So I'll just summarize Psalm 104. In short, I'm just going to tell you the first verse. Bless the Lord, O my soul, O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty. It's a praise psalm. It's talking about how great and awesome God is. But here's what's interesting. It describes about God creating everything. It's almost, I'm not going to say it necessarily is, but it's almost like another creation text. It's another text looking at creation and how God did everything. It talks about the way God created things and just how awesome and great you are. It's kind of like Job and God's first speech, where he talks about how his creation. So it's not like Genesis 1, but also talks about creation and the things God does. Kind of like Psalm 74 and Psalm 89, where it has looking back on creation, but with a different lens. It's like Genesis 2, look at creation with a different lens. And Genesis 1 has its own lens and how great and awesome God is. And that's the backdrop for Psalm 104, kind of. It's praising God for how awesome and mighty He is. It's a beautiful, you could do so many sermons on just this one psalm. It is gorgeous. Let's go to 24 and 26. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth or the land is full of your creatures. The sea or the yam is great and wide, which is filled with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great. There go the ships, and Leviathan which you formed to play in it. Very different looking Leviathan. There is no, it's an enemy, we need to kill it, we need to fight it. It's there to play. The word there for play can be translated as playing, laugh, be merry, joke around. It's there to have fun. Like it's kind of like demeaning the chaos level of it. It's like it's just another one of God's creatures, and is there to just kind of do its thing. It's there to have fun and swim around and be a fun little sea serpent. This 7-headed thing that terrifying, but it's just there to play. Just having fun, swimming around. It's kind of like Genesis 1-ish, where Genesis 1 is God creates the Tannim. He creates the Tannim. They're good, and here it's. Yeah, God creates a Leviathan. It's it's this little creature that swims around. It's like a little pet.
It's a lizard.
It's like a little pet, a little puppy, playing around, just having fun. Then we're gonna backtrack to Psalm 40. Happy is the man who makes the Lord his trust. Again, I'm more convinced that blessed. I understand why people kind of put it there. I based on the English definition and what the other word means for blessed, it doesn't really work. This is like a wisdom. It's like saying like this is the person who truly is happy, person who's truly flourishing. Has truly understand what joy is, what it means to live in life. This person, this guy, he gets it, is the one who trusts in God, who trusts in Yahweh. No other gods, just this one. So happy is he, flourishing is he, the man who makes the Lord his trust, who does not turn to, in some translations, to the proud. It's fine. I don't love it. But to keep going, to those who go astray after a lie. So, here's why they would probably go with the proud. Here's a couple reasons they could do with that. One, so Rehavim is Rahav plural. So if we're talking Rahav, in most of its cases referring to this enemy of Israel usually, or this chaos dragon, usually it's describing one being. But now we have a plural. So a plurality of this Rahav. So if they're going to translate, they are to capture the idea of multiple figures, right? That's just kind of what you have to do. And it's there, it's Rahavim, it's plural. But also, so if you look at what Rahav means, it refers to a dragon, but also refers to those who are violent and raging, like the raging one. Like I said, Rahav means the raging one. So there's this violent person, this violent being. And it's plural. It's turning towards those. It's almost saying turning towards those who are raging against God, who are roaring against God, like the dragons. Because we ever use this, it's the words used for dragons. Happy is the one who doesn't turn to the raging like other people who are effectively like dragons. Happy is the one who is turning to Yahweh, not towards the dragon, not towards the seed of the dragon, if you will. Going back to Genesis 3, the seed of the serpent. Happy are those who become the seed of the woman, not the seed of the serpent. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that's, we look at every use of the word, it's referring to a dragon. And so if you put that back in there, who does not turn to the dragons? To those who go astray after a lie. And the dragons would be the enemies of God, the people who go against them, the spiritual forces who go against them, who just don't go the direction of the enemies. That'd be another way to kind of look at it. Happy is the one who trusts in God, who goes his way, and not the way of the enemies. Not the way of the dragons. Not the way of the rebels, but the way of God. And sure, proud works are because those people who do it are proud. They have pride in themselves to do it. They think their way is better. So it makes sense. I think it's a little too interpretive, personally. But I understand why you have to put something there to get it. And so proud works. That's why I say it's fine. I just don't love it. So if you're describing their condition, it works. The idea of the proud. But if we put that back in the context of the ones who rage against God, the ones who who are opposing God, the ones who are giving into the dragon, being the seeds of the serpent, don't go their way. Go the way of God. Go the way of being the seed of the woman, the one in alignment with God, the one in alignment with, in our case, with Jesus, not the way of the enemy. The ones who are truly happy, the ones who are truly flourishing, the ones who go this way, not this way. And it's these two paths, the narrow path and the broad path. And this way's hard because it doesn't always look great, but this way is easy because you can just go this way, do whatever you want. And it just all ties together. And You have to remember, like, the Psalms are songs, but they're also wisdom literature, so they're meant to make you think. So the one who truly flourishes, the one who's truly happy is the way who goes Yahweh's way, not the way of the dragon, not the way of the seed of the serpent, not the way of the ragers, not the way of the rebels, not the way of those who ultimately are proud in what they do. They have pride, that they think they are better than God.